It is the 14th day of August 2023. Hello and welcome to the News International Edition. We are coming to you live from our Vision Group headquarters here in Kampala, Uganda. I'm Emma Akwero. We start with an update on the uprising in the country of Niger. Now, the latest coming in is that the military regime has vowed to prosecute ousted President Mohammad Bazoum for high treason and undermining the security of the country in a statement read out on national television. Thousands in Niger are in support of the military coup as concerns for ousted President Mohammad Bazoum's detention conditions mount.
Niger's military regime has vowed to prosecute ousted President Mohammad Bazoum for high treason after saying they gathered enough evidence to show that he undermined the internal and external security of Niger.
En tout état de cause, le gouvernement nigérien a réuni.
In any case, the Nigerian government has so far gathered the necessary evidence to prosecute the deposed president and his local and foreign accomplices before the competent national and international bodies for high treason and undermining Niger's internal and external security following his exchanges with nationals, foreign heads of state and heads of international organizations.
Des responsables d'organisations internationales.
Bazoum has been held in his presidential residence along with his son and wife since the day of the coup. Military leaders said they had not taken over Bazoum's residence and that he was still free to communicate with the outside world. Bazoum had received regular visits from his doctor, they said. A consultation took place on Saturday, according to an advisor to the ousted president. Elsewhere, thousands turned out to attend a concert in support of the army at a sports stadium in the capital Niamey after a group of officers overthrew the democratically elected government of President Mohammad Bazoum last month. I have come to support my country. We came to support the military artist who is also here to support the CNSP. Some of the coup supporters believe the country will be better managed by the military. We think the security situation is better left in the hands of the military, who have taken power, to leave them in peace. They will continue to provide security because we've suffered a lot. They've killed our husbands, our children, our fathers. Meanwhile, Niger's detained president was seen by his doctor on Saturday, his entourage said, amid mounting concern for his condition, while Nigerian religious leaders met the officers who seized power last month to try to defuse the crisis. The Muslim leaders visited the capital Niamey with the blessing of Nigerian President Bola Tinubu, head of the West African Regional Bloc, ECOWAS, a source close to the delegation told our reporter. ECOWAS has approved the deployment of a standby force to restore constitutional order in Niger as soon as possible, but scrapped a Saturday crisis meeting on the coup that deposed Mohammad Bazoum. Bazoum, 63, was toppled on July 26th by his presidential guard, which has since held him and his family at his official Niamey residence. The European Union, the African Union and the United Nations joined others in sounding the alarm for Bazoum on Friday after reports described worsening detention conditions. UN Rights Chief Volker Turk on Friday said Bazoum's reported detention conditions could amount to inhuman and degrading treatment in violation of international human rights law.
Still in the continent of Africa, in Libya, Mohamed Alafi is still waiting for justice for the death of his 30-year-old son, Morad, who was abducted by a feared militia in 2019, killed and thrown into a mass grave in the western city of Tahona, where his remains were found in 2020 with hundreds of other bodies. Alafi, along with other families who have lost their loved ones, are demanding for justice. They believe only death penalty can ease the pain of those whose children were murdered in cold blood. Capital punishment remains illegal in Libya.
A photograph of Murad Alafi hangs in the family farmhouse in western Libya 3 years after he was found in a mass grave. His father wants his killers dead. Mohammad Alafi believes the prison terms of 6 years to life handed down by a military court in February to 30 people convicted of murder are not enough.
الدولة ما وفتش معاهم ولا وفتهم حقوقهم ولا شدت المجرمين.
The state has not fulfilled its promise to the victims, nor has it granted them their rights. It has not apprehended the criminals. It has neglected its duties, leaving people in a state of confusion. For this reason, we demand that the state and those in charge, if there is justice in Libya, apprehend all the criminals. These criminals are still in Tahuna.
ما زالوا يدهروا في ترهونة. أهل القتلة موجودين في ترهونة. المجرمين قاعدين في ترهونة. وفي اللي قاعد لابد في.
The perpetrators are in Tahuna, comfortable at their homes. Some have even paid money in form of bribes, whereas relatives of victims are fearful. They are truly afraid. If a perpetrator were to file a complaint against you, the law enforcement would arrest you. We demand justice. Only God will bring justice.
والإنصاف ما لقيناش شيء. العدل وين؟ العدل عند الله سبحانه وتعالى.
Relatives of the hundreds of others who were tortured, killed and dumped in row upon row of mass graves in Tahuna agree with Alafi, saying they await on justice. The families who lost relatives in the mass killings say that only the death penalty can ease the pain of those who have lost their children murdered in cold blood. Capital punishment is still legal in Libya, but the ultimate penalty is not often applied. We, as the relatives of the victims, have classified the main demands into 3 points. The first is to find the missing. By doing so, you are helping the relatives a lot. Secondly, pursuing and prosecuting the criminals. As relatives of the victims, we will not take matters into our own hands, rather leave it for the judicial system and the law.
طبعا اهالي الضحايا ما خدوش الاستفتاء الحق بالذات، طبعا تركوا كل الحكم للعداله والشرط الثالث اللي هو جبر الضرر.
The third point is repatriations, which is a significant issue that requires serious consideration from the government. Some families have lost their breadwinners, leaving only women and orphans dependent on relatives for help.
ما عندهمش من يعوله، يعني نساء وايتام فقط، يعني الا بمساعده بعض اهالي الضحايا او من بعض ذويهم من الدرجه الثالثه او الدرجه الرابعه.
Many families in Libya are still reeling from the years of violence and injustice that followed the toppling and killing in 2011 of Muammar Gaddafi. The dictator's demise plunged the North African country into chaos. Tahuna, a town some 80 kilometers south of the capital Tripoli with a population of 40,000, stands out because of the atrocities committed there. A feared militia called the Kainat, named after the 6 brothers who ran it, seized Tahuna in 2015 and set about systematically silencing opponents and often their entire families. Lions that the Al-Qani brothers kept during their reign of terror were rumored to feed on the flesh of their victims. Mohammad Alafi will never forget the day the Kainat abducted his 30-year-old son in 2019. Libya's authority for the disappeared has so far identified 226 sets of remains and is still searching for more in 3 main sites. A second trial of dozens of others suspected of involvement in the Tahuna killings is expected to conclude in the coming weeks, the Justice Ministry said. Nevertheless, many of the townspeople are skeptical that this will bring them closure. The military prosecutor's office tried people for the crimes in Tahuna and delivered unjust and insufficient verdicts, said Mossab Abou Kleich of an association of victims' families, referring to February's verdicts. Whatever the outcome of the court proceedings, the tragedy of Tahuna will continue to affect people's lives.
Now, away from the continent of Africa, let's head over now to Hawaii, where about 150 churchgoers prayed in a coffee shop after the church was destroyed by the Maui wildfire. Pastor Asa Brown said a lot of their people had to get out of Lahaina and go to live with friends or in shelters. Many of those who fled the wild blaze say they received no warning notice.
The death toll in Hawaii from the deadliest U.S. wildfire in more than a century ticked towards 100 on Sunday, fueling criticism that government inaction contributed to the heavy loss of life. At least 96 people were confirmed to have died as of Sunday night, but officials warned the figure was likely to rise as recovery crews with cadaver dogs worked their way through hundreds of homes and burned vehicles in Lahaina. Pastor Asa Brown says the church in Lahaina got burned and so a resident offered a coffee shop for prayers, adding they are hopeful to rebuild.
Well, our church was destroyed in the fire, and a lot of our people had to get out of Lahaina, and they came into this area to stay with friends or in shelters. And this is the coffee attic, and the gentleman that owns it invited us to use it to have a church service today since we had no place to meet. We're going to rebuild by God's grace, and of course there's 2,000 buildings destroyed, and so it's how much time it's going to take is hard to say, but by God's grace we will rebuild.
More than 2,200 buildings were damaged or destroyed as the fire tore through Lahaina, according to official estimates, wreaking $5.5 billion in damage and leaving thousands homeless. Mirazo and Glory May are evacuees who say not all hope is lost.
We're keeping positive thoughts and, staying strong and keep telling each other that we're going to come out stronger. With God's grace, we're all safe. We all have our families. So.
Before we come to church, we're like, why did this happen? But today, because of his words, Pastor, it brings me more, I feel more comfortable and more at peace, that there's reason behind this. We gotta be strong, we'll get through this.
The remains we are finding are from a fire that melted metal, said Mayu Police Chief John Peltier. When we pick up the remains, they fall apart. That was making identification difficult, he added, appealing for those with missing relatives to give DNA samples that might speed up the process. The wildfire is the deadliest in the United States since 1918, when 453 people died in Minnesota and Wisconsin, according to non-profit research group the National Fire Protection Association. The death toll surpassed 2018's Camp Fire in California, which virtually wiped the small town of Paradise off the map and killed 86 people. Questions are being asked about how prepared authorities were for the catastrophe, despite the island's exposure to natural hazards such as tsunamis, earthquakes, and violent storms. In its emergency management plan last year, the state of Hawaii described the risk wildfires posed to people as being low. The congregation of Grace Baptist Church, which was levered in the blaze, gathered Sunday in a coffee shop in Kahului for 2 hours of solace. Maui police said the public would not be allowed into Lahaina while safety assessments and searches were ongoing, even some of those who could prove they lived there. Meanwhile, many of those who fled the fast-moving wildfire that killed dozens of people on the Hawaiian island of Maui said they received no warning notice. When asked Sunday why none of the island sirens had been activated, Hawaii Senator Mazi Hirono said he would wait for the results of an investigation announced by the state's Attorney General.
Day when the storm passed by, okay, all of a sudden my apartment went black. I said, is it gonna rain? When we opened the door, it was orange from the fire.
Pretty amazing to see, the way the community is all stepping up and trying to help everyone. They're bringing in so much supplies, food, water, clothing, just anything and everything that we could possibly need.
Maui's fires follow other extreme weather events in North America this summer, with record-breaking wildfires still burning across Canada and a major heat wave baking the U.S. Southwest. Europe and parts of Asia have also endured soaring temperatures, with major fires and floods wreaking havoc. Scientists say human-caused global warming is exacerbating natural hazards, making them both more likely and more deadly.
Very sad scenes there indeed. Now, a ceremony has been held in the northern French port of Calais for migrants who died after their boat sank on Saturday while attempting to cross the channel between France and England. 6 Afghan men died and up to 2 other people could still be missing. Paris prosecutors on Sunday took over the investigation into the deaths of at least 6 migrants whose boat sank trying to cross the channel between France and England. Now, prosecutors in the Channel Port of Bolog opened an investigation on Saturday, hours after the tragedy, but the investigations were switched to Paris. Officials in both offices told reporters 6 Afghan men died when a migrant boat thought to have been carrying up to 66 people bound for England sank in the channel in the early hours of Saturday. Most of those on board were Afghans, with some Sudanese and a few minors, said the French Coastal Authority, Prima. British and French Coast Guard rescued 59 people, but the death toll remains provisional. Although the sea search was called off at nightfall on Saturday, vessels passing through the channel on Sunday were urged to be vigilant. Prima stressed on Sunday, "We don't know if we'll really be looking for anyone." On Saturday, France's junior minister for the sea, Harvey Bavel, denounced the criminal traffickers he said were behind the deaths, promising to fight their smuggling networks. On Sunday, around 200 people gathered in Salais to the port to pay tribute to those who had died. They marched behind a large banner listing the names of the 376 migrants that activists say have died attempting the perilous channel crossing since 1999. "These people are dying to general indifference," said a statement from the SES, an alliance of associations who organize the burial or the repatriation of the victims of the crossings. The statement denounced the government for continually harassing migrants and denying them their basic rights, and asked if the authorities in England and France would allow the survivors of Saturday's shipwreck to be reunited with their families. Despite the dangers, other migrants camped along the north coast of France remained determined to attempt the crossing. But since neither the French nor the British authorities were willing to help, according to reports, the channel between France and Britain is one of the world's busiest shipping lanes, and strong currents are common. Around 1,000 migrants are on the northern French coast waiting for an opportunity to cross the channel, according to authorities. More than 100,000 migrants have crossed the channel on small boats from France to southeast England since Britain began publicly recording the arrivals in 2018, official figures revealed on Friday. French authorities have stepped up patrols and other deterrent measures after London agreed in March to send Paris hundreds of millions of euros annually towards the effort. The numbers still attempting the crossing have piled pressure on British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's government, which has made stopping the boats a key priority ahead of general elections due next year. Last year, a record of 45,000 migrants made the crossing. The News International edition will take a short break, but please stay with us.